What event in your life made you realize you're not as smart as you thought? I was a cashier for a couple of years in high school. One time, this guy got me to give him change for $100 without actually giving me the bill. We watched the security footage afterwards. Still couldn't figure out how the slick bastard did it. That sucks. Bet you're careful with money since. Thankfully, the store didn't make me pay for it, but I do look back on it as a humbling experience. One of two that stand out. The other was my speeding ticket, but that one I deserved. At a bar with some friends, and one girl said that her parents told her last week that she was in a special group for slow readers all throughout elementary school, and she never realized it. We laughed really hard until one by one we all realized we were too. So that's why I would always be pulled out of class every day and have to read with that random person. I didn't realize I spent the first 2 years of elementary school in a special speech therapy class because nearly no one could understand a word I said. Coincidentally, the classes would always make me miss reading class. Took me until high school to be on the same reading level as everyone else. There is a joke that everyone starts a physics major in college because they want to understand how the universe works, and everyone finishes feeling that they know less about the universe than when they started. Then you go on to do a PhD to show yourself that no one else really knows a lot about the universe either. Seriously, I think everyone who goes into science, particularly hard science, does so out of suspicion that they could be the next Einstein or Curie. But all those who finish are the people who realize their first year that there is no real innate genius, just people who work really hard. By my final year of my physics degree, I had finally learned to avoid the modules that advised a strong aptitude in maths is recommended. I think I started off thinking that since I was better at maths than most of my high school class, I must be categorically good at it. But 4 years of university put me right. Interactions with people who are intentionally, maliciously manipulative. It always catches me completely off guard. I'm usually really perceptive of people and situations, but I never expect or anticipate those types. When I became a social worker, my manipulation deflector kicked into high gear. You see this with lawyers and nurses too. It has become really hard to sell me stuff. Leaving school. I was always pretty smart in school, and all my teachers told me as much. But when I went out into the real world, I realized smarts are relative and just about everyone is smart in their own way. I was academically smart, but I was ill prepared to deal with mundane things in the ordinary world, like handling money, relationships, etc. Also in the American system at least, you spend the first 18 to 22 years of your life, roughly, in a system where your intelligence is ranked against other people almost precisely your age. You leave college feeling like the best because you are the smartest 22-year-old out of all the 22-year-olds. Then you start working with people 10, 20, 30 plus years older than you with all that accumulated knowledge and experience over you, and you realize you're just getting started on all the things you have to learn. When I got fired from a barista job for the second time while on academic probation. With all my previous scholarships, skipped grades, 40 seconds Rubik's Cube solves at a young age, musical talent, it took 4 solid years of unadulterated failure to realize I had a narcissism just shy of the DSM. The study habits of a potato, the emotional intelligence of a grade schooler, and absolutely no ability to survive on my own. My self-worth was entirely based on my intelligence, so instead of expanding it properly with hard work, I held my breath and blew as hard as I could until it inflated like a balloon. Grandioso posts like this one are an example of how hard I blow. Literally experiencing this right now. I've been ducking and dodging my way through life like a chameleon, always able to fit in whatever social group I needed to advance. I was always smart enough to alter my personality to be the ideal candidate for situation X. I'm now realizing that I constructed my marriage through those same actions and have very little emotional insight because I've never needed it before. Back then it was easy because there was always another monkey bar to grab. That isn't the case anymore, and I have to actually figure out who I am before I lose my wife, who I have a deep affection for. She literally has no idea who I am, and the worst part is that I don't think I have any more insight than her. My first semester of art school. I was one of the top art kids in my high school and got accepted to one of the top art schools in the country. But of course, I'm good, right? Only problem is that now I'm surrounded by every other school in the country's top art kids. The difference between the projects and concepts we were expected to do versus what we did in high school, the art program in my high school had no money, I had to buy my own supplies at times, was astounding. Let alone that I'd never really gone through an actual critique in my life before. We had to explain our first project, make a portrait of ourselves using only duct tape. I'd never done 3D material, aside from clay projects. Most of my work at that time were drawings and paintings. It was awful. Halfway through my explanation, I'm looking around the room and realizing how childish and stunted my ideas were. No one had a thing to say. It was that bad. I went home after class and cried for hours. I love when people snicker when they hear I have a bachelor's degree in art. They obviously have never been an art major. The thing is a lot harder than anyone thinks. I thought I was good too until our advanced painting class had to build 5 4x5 canvases and complete paintings on all of them in under a month. Then, after all that work, having our professor rip us apart because our ideas were uninspired, cliche, or just downright boring. I've never come closer to hitting a teacher in my life, and then at the end of the semester still being thankful for the critique. Trying to get food out of my braces by covering my finger with my sleeve so it didn't get cut up again. Sweater got caught on the bracket and I panicked, which led me to repeatedly smack myself in the face. Medical school. Going through the first decades of my life being the biggest fish in a cup full of water. Never had to study for an exam in my life through college graduation. Nothing could have been a bigger kick in the balls than my first day of class when I realized I was already a week behind on my material. If there's any confusion or if there's any disbelief about this, I just never was challenged with something that required more than paying attention in class lecture. Knowing the material covered in classes is enough to get a decent MCAT score. And it's not as if medical school material is much harder, but there's just so much of it that you will have to put in a lot of time merely to cover it all. Not study it, that takes even more time. And it's harder. And if anyone happens to be curious, I'm not a doctor, but I hope to be one soon. Law school. Man, I thought I was well off on day one, but my first semester scores knocked that out of me right quick. I had no idea how to study because I'd never needed to, and everyone else around me was as smart as I was, or smarter. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. Spent 2 years writing a screenplay. I finally finished it and unleashed it onto the world. Reactions were terrible, as they should have been. Unlikable protagonist, boring story. What was I thinking? All of my unchecked confidence was drained in a day. I felt like such a fool, because I was. I teach creative writing and I just wanted to say, no matter how awful you think your screenplay was, it's still great that you finished it. A lot of people don't have the guts or discipline to even get that far. Not saying you should pat yourself on the back and be done with it, but don't feel like one bad screenplay is a reason to stop if you're passionate about it. It's almost inevitable the first time you try, you're going to be bad at it. For some reason, in writing in particular, out of all of the arts, a lot of people seem to think that people with true talent will just nail it on their first try. You know that when you learn guitar, you're going to suck for a few months before you can even play Wonderwall, but for some reason, people think that if you're just destined to be a good writer, you'll be great right from the beginning. It's just not true. Keep at it if you're interested in it. During my dissertation, having a panel of experts judge your every decision is very humbling. After I defended my thesis, I was quite crushed. Man, I did not expect that level of criticism. I was sitting there answering while thinking, why did I not pick an easier committee? Afterwards, everyone was congratulating me, saying I had a great presentation and answered all the questions really well. But I simply wasn't feeling that accomplished. I was convinced one of the professors really hated me and that I'd have a tough time with my future in the field. Took me a couple of weeks to get over my post-PhD slump and almost a year to understand that professor had nothing against me and actually likes me, just had high standards, which I appreciate now. I am old enough to have read through the Harry Potter series as they were published and twice more since. Genius me only realized this week that the house name Slytherin is a play on the word slithering. Diagon Alley. Say it. Listen. Getting kicked out and being broke. Turns out I didn't deserve everything given to me. What did you do when that happened to you? I'm asking for a friend. Manned up and split rent with a friend. Staked out some cheap food that I could eat and without going over budget. Swallowed my pride and went back to slinging pizzas. It's never about being smart, but putting in the time and actually showing up. In terms of book smarts, college, just college in general, I was the type to always have a really good memory for things I'd heard and paid attention in class. Then I had to learn to actually study and do actual papers with actual research, and everything just completely fell apart. In terms of just general feeling of intelligence though, I forget when, but someone said, the you 5 years ago was a bloody fool, and in 5 years you'll look back at yourself and realize you're a fool right now. I think it was around when I was 14, and it just stuck with me. It wasn't even a specific trigger event or anything, just a moment of key enlightenment that I've kept with me forever. Getting my first job after college. Thought I knew everything there was to know in the field. My coworkers proved I was very wrong. I can't even find a job related to my major, and I graduated last year. Spending time with a 6-year-old. What's the biggest meteorite in the sky right now? How many caterpillars turn into butterflies in a day? Why do we use the word thousand? Why not a different word? It's not a nice word. Just watch me put this Lego together flawlessly without instruction, whilst you cry over the IKEA cabinet you've been working on for a week. This is like a childlike belief that everything can be known by a human being, as you grow up and realize how little of our world is knowable. All throughout K-12, I was a whiz in math. I entered a district-wide math competition twice and got a trophy twice for my division. I was always the best and smartest guy in math in any room, and I got really cocky about it, to the point where my AP calculus teacher saw that I wasn't even studying for the AP exam. I got a 4, but I think he knew that I could probably have gotten a 5 if I really worked for it. But I never had to study for a math test ever in my life. I went to a good university, and the first math class I took, I figured I didn't need to study either. I figured I'd just ace the class and get an easy A, like I always did, since I was the smartest guy there too. The problem is that most people who major in math were the smartest guys in their class in high school. I got my first B in math ever at the end of the quarter, and I realized that I was a big fish in a little pond in high school. But in college, I was a little fish in a big pond, and I need to actually work and study to get good grades in math.